Because PLA can't even let me live my life for 2 seconds, Arizu approaches me before I can even get to work. She's starring in the upcoming Crimson Mirelands plot, which currently boils down to, Ursaluna is in a frenzy. Go, stop that. The game wants us moving, and I've already written a solid conclusion to this chapter, so I'll cooperate. We also get a routine fight with Akari, who now has a Mime Jr. Shit, I guess that's the conclusion now. I didn't want to end on the words Mime Jr. Wait. So that's what Mire is. The Mirelands introduction is modest and minimalistic, quickly retreating back into exposé and attempted comedy. Akari flags space-time distortions as her next survey target, which is never acknowledged again, as we make for the Salacion ruins with an Ursaluna to fix. The Mirelands are notably more open and more hostile than the Fieldlands, forcing you to experiment with new items to measure up. Heavy balls are exactly what they seem. They're Pokeballs that can't be thrown as far because they're heavy, and Pokemon can't break out of them as easily because they're heavy. They raise the skill ceiling and introduce a vital risk-reward element to the otherwise simple catching system. Their physics loosen up when throwing Pokemon from them, but not distractingly so. They also feel great to use, because they're heavy. Put simply, I love heavy balls. The name could use some work. Pokemon drop items upon defeat, which loosely scale with their power, although the feature achieves more in flavor than practicality. There are certainly benefits to engaging with this system. Alpha Pokemon yield Seeds of Mastery, and select Pokemon yield Evolution Stones, but when the expected value is a Tumblestone and a Medicinal Leak, it's very easy to overlook. It's not a load-bearing mechanic, but it's appreciated for what it is. Salacion Ruins is a big, empty room. It's so big and empty that it's almost imposing, but doesn't quite make it and ends up looking like a big, empty room. Sinnoh's Salacion Ruins is a sprawling, maze-like cave system, and this location's contextual and geological depth suggests that Hisui once planned to follow suit, but didn't. Caliba, Ursaluna's warden, greets us with a hearty get lost, then stands in the corner while Volo unravels his foreboding team of pre-evolved Cynthiamons. I mean, hey, plenty of corner to stand in. Okay, I wrote that line before learning about Sinnoh's Salacion Ruins, and now it's bumming me out. The Crimson Mirelands feel unfinished in both story and gameplay without the memorable set piece this should have been. We're sent to confront the Misfortune Sisters for stealing the one interesting wall junk in the whole room. The Misfortunes are Hisui's premier nuisances and very little else. Their unique face paint, intricately patterned clothing, and cutthroat expression yield amazing designs, while they're held back by a lack of coherent motives or principles. The choice to theme them around luck is certainly a choice. Hearing, for some of us, simply surviving another day takes all that we have, and I'll be your unlucky charm from the same person feels incongruous. I mean, this girl's literally named Coin. That's gotta hurt. They're serviceable scapegoats, if anything. This shimmering sky tumblestone across the river lured me like a prismatic siren to Davy Jones's locker. Thankfully, drowning is basically a non-starter. If you're in water for a few seconds, the game will put you out of it. No complaints from me. We reconstruct the wall to discover a message consisting of Unknown, a vaguely mystical Pokemon with 28 forms resembling the Latin script in some punctuation. Unknown makes no sense. I know that's canonical, even if it's a bit of a cop-out, but it's especially true for the English localization. From my perspective, Caliba is using her wisdom to translate a font. Laventon's Pokédex entry reads, I've pointed out that the species' many forms resemble writing from other lands. No one will take me seriously, despite them resembling the writing Laventon is currently doing. I should mention, now that we're on the topic of the English language, that this game is getting hardcore into its poetry. Charm recited a passage to me earlier, and these Unknown are arranged in iambic heptameter. I don't have much to say about its poetry. It doesn't read as particularly inspired to me, and the localization understandably struggles to capture the original Japanese poeticisms, further disjoining the sequence. You want to know something crazy? Yeah, is this common knowledge? I think I scaled the cliff somehow on first playthrough simply because I didn't know Pokemon could do this. It could have been cut for clarity. Beyond it lies the Scarlet Bog, a sprawling and surprisingly dangerous open area due to hostile Pokemon and thick mud. Yeah, that's mud. It's called the Scarlet Bog for a reason. When exposed to sunlight, the bog becomes a lava lake. It's too pixelated to read as mud and too smooth to measure depth in. Weirdeer gathers realistic mud wading through it, which doesn't even scan as the same material. PLA managed to butcher the mud texture. Let's talk about it. This game doesn't look the greatest. There are surfaces that are blatantly made of poorly textured triangles, actions and reactions that straight up weren't animated. I've seen textures overlap in and out of existence. I've seen circular objects cast rectangular shadows. I've seen walls gloss and ungloss based on minute camera movements. This game looks rough sometimes. However, I'd hesitate to call its visual shortcomings systematic. The art style pulls its weight. Its cel-shaded, low-definition approach minimizes resource intensity while remaining appealing and tonally apt. Pokémon, being caricaturized creatures, thrive in cartoony art styles. The game's overall theming is great, most areas look great, the models are extremely polished, and cutscenes can be stunning with proper cinematic direction and choreography. The lighting is top-notch, giving way to appropriately visible nights and breathtaking sunsets. It certainly fails in places, but it's not an abjectly ugly game. I'm less forgiving on the performance front. Given its release on the Nintendo Switch, a system that fits in most male pockets, performance was always going to be compromised, but PLA's optimization is still jarringly bad. The game runs at a reasonable 30 FPS, but animations promptly tank to 3 at any perceptible distance. Thank God movement isn't tied to frame rate. Pokémon render distance is wildly inadequate for a game hinged on wild Pokémon, so much so that a Weirdeer can outrun it. Even turn-based battles, which should be frictionless, stutter and freeze a baffling amount. It's not all bad though. The variable resolution is surprisingly reliable, handheld mode stacks up nicely, and loading times are broadly agreeable until you connect to Wi-Fi. Even considering their typically minimal impact on gameplay, PLA's performance issues sadly do impact the game's immersion, tactility, and visual appeal. Ha! This guy missed a shiny Pokemon. Loser! Ursaluna's introductory cutscene revels in frivolous nothing. Ursaluna appears unceremoniously and visibly unfrenzied, although it takes an uneventful fight and pages of dialogue from Caliba to discern that. Everything about the sequence, from the drab, downtrodden arena to the truly indecipherable invention of Toxicon to treat Ursaluna. Seriously, this reads like a brand deal for homeopathy. To the fact that Caliba mentions Arizu directly after noticing invisible powder in Ursaluna's fur, to the total lack of animations, to the complete silence, sucks. I know it's meant to be a fake out. It promises you a good cutscene and fakes you out with a bad one. The bigger issue is that it doesn't read like a fake out because every cutscene is like this. PLA's cutscenes are puppet shows. Camera cuts forgo custom animations, and even music is a luxury. PLA can't convey anything other than tepid dialogue, so everything else falls flat. Ursaluna is the only ride Pokemon that doesn't expand traversal, instead locating and digging up treasure. You're expected to follow scents pretty far, which is a hard sell given Hisui's hostility, Ursaluna's inhibited mobility, and Treasure's limited utility. Mounting Ursaluna here leads you to Old Verse 9, organically introducing old verses and somewhat justifying Ursaluna, although it remains disposable by ride Pokemon standards. Given Weirdeer's continued usefulness though, offering an auxiliary mount next is only fair. We begrudgingly report back to Laventon, who's given the unfortunate task of contextualizing unknown notes. He does so by observing an unknown, literally supposing the existence of 27 other forms, and updating your Pokédex with hints regarding their locations. Something Solaceon Ruins. This cutscene also sucks, but at least unknown notes exist now. Back in Jubilife, Adaman introduces the real frenzied Pokemon of the Mirelands, Hisuian Lilligant, making sure to use its preferred honorific Lady of the Ridge. We love a gender-inclusive tyrannical leader. Hilariously enough, there's a pretty big caveat to that we'll get to way later. We need to find Lilligant's warden, Arizu, by having Ursaluna track the scent of the potato mochi she ate recently, which it can't normally do. PLA has to go to such great lengths to make Ursaluna seem useful. Props for the Benny cameo though. This guy asks for some oran berries, gets them, and promptly dematerializes. Peak content right there. PLA's profuse Ursaluna apologism culminates in about 30 seconds of gameplay before we find Arizu and everything resolves itself. Arizu feels bad for not telling Adaman about Lilligant. Adaman shows up and forgives her. Oh, and she got the powder on Ursaluna, obviously. Nothing about this plot feels worthwhile. The Ursaluna fake-out is frustrating, the powder thread is clearly DOA, and nobody from Caliba to Coin has any coherent direction. We're told to quell Lilligant's frenzy, but at this point I don't even want to do that. so naturally, I wander. And I find a few wisps for my troubles. Wisps are at their best when you catch a rhythm, finding one after another, stacking those little dopamine hits. Seeing a slew of wisps on first parse of an area always feels great, and subsequent parses encourage thorough engagement with Hisui's layered world. Well, half of the time. Wisps practically disappear during the day, forcing wisp hunts to a base camp and a screeching halt every 10 minutes. It's a frustrating use of an otherwise flavorful day-night cycle, snatching two broadly appreciated mechanics from truly satisfactory implementation. There's a request to set up a base camp next to Ursaluna's discount arena. I'm glad it's optional. 99% of players will see the quest giver, so their reward is determined by their engagement. Mechanically, it's an attritional 3v1 with no strategy. Battles with multiple targets function as punishment for overworld overzealousness and for tests of metal like this, but they're not fun per se. I got triple teamed 5 times and rocked their shit with my newly caught Graveler. This game sure loves having characters just appear out of nowhere. I mean, this is comedy gold, no complaints from me. The open air of the Mirelands puts wild Pokémon behaviors on full display. PLA cut no corners here. Every inch of Hisui is full of Pokémon walking around, interacting with others of their species, engaging in countless unique animations, doing their cries like real animals, and even reacting differentiably to stimuli. Each Pokémon has a temperament, according to which it'll attack or flee at varying urgencies. Temperament varies by species, scenario, and even nature. Some Pokémon form alliances and stand up for each other. Some Pokémon fall asleep, rendering them vulnerable and look absolutely precious doing it. These quirks seem superfluous, but they let Pokémon cease to be strictly enumerable. It's hard to love a string of numbers. Pokémon would do well to be loved, the adorable creatures that they are, and therefore not be seen as a string of numbers. Unfortunately, that's unavoidable when you are a string of numbers. Pokémon growth and individuality are measured in stats, making Pokémon feel mechanistic when the partition inevitably falls, but wild Pokémon behavior can afford absolute abstrusity. As such, wild Pokémon feel uniquely alive, reinforced by sweepingly spectacular animation. This doesn't even touch on species-specific quirks like Sudowoodo pretending to be a tree, or Chimchar putting out the fire on its tail before sleeping. Every little detail, acknowledged or not, strengthens the ambient hum of the Pokémon world. It feels like the world is always there, not just when you look at it, and it wasn't made with you in mind. Hisui is frequently and thanklessly hostile, but it's weirdly easier to invest in a world that's not invested in you. It feels like an adventure rather than a play place. Take Ursa's Ring, for example, a Teddiursa den with an Alpha Ursa ring raring to rip apart anyone who threatens its young. This organic, flavorful, and invigorating area wouldn't read if not for the nuanced Pokémon behavior system. The level design might seem plain in isolation, but the Pokémon make PLA's world truly complete. That hostility extends to the mechanics, too. If you fail a turn-based capture, the Pokémon can Omni-Boost and kill you instantly. This is somehow the saving grace of the system. It makes contextual sense. The Pokémon just narrowly escaped remote imprisonment, I'd be pissed too. And it brilliantly front-loads the tension without forfeiting the fight. The attack buff lets it rip through weaker teams, and yeah, that's what happened here, but the defense buff lets competent teams bring it to lower HP and raise its catch odds. It devalues blind RNG in favor of nuanced decision-making and team building. For a simple stat buff, it covers some impressive ground and gives turn-based captures a purpose. In contrast, Obscuration is blind RNG. Using certain moves conceals your Pokémon in a mud cloud, decreasing the accuracy of your opponent's moves. It's well contextualized and thankfully temporary, but the gameplay impact is obnoxious and uncompetitive. PLA weaves sound design delicately into its expansive, immersive world, often ditching the music in favor of subtle sound effects. Menu jingles are appropriately splashy and responsive, occasionally referencing past games but remaining distinct, while the terrain-dependent footsteps of both you and your Pokémon invisibly amp the believability. PLA also dips its toes into voice acting, which was probably necessary with such mobile player characters, although only to the minimum viable extent. It delivers some light vocalizations for certain actions, with male and female voices available that sadly aren't customizable or interchangeable. As skillful as the voice acting is, having some dude grunting in my ear for the entire game doesn't immerse me. Regardless, conveying information audibly is always worthwhile, and dialogue remains completely unvoiced. PLA rarely feels incomplete without voice acting, but giving your characters a broader artistic canvas is almost always beneficial, and proper voice acting would certainly help out PLA's less fidelitous cutscenes. Pokémon cries are PLA's key auditory anomaly, being choppy 16-bit sound bites that are broadly unintelligible as animal calls, but PLA makes auditory lemonade by manipulating each Pokémon's cry into 6 conditional variations and reusing some iconic cries as ambient background chatter. Scruffy has an excellent deep dive into PLA's cries if you're interested. Hisui's soundscape certainly reinforces its central fantasy, but the soundtrack is what elevates it. To comprehensively examine PLA's soundtrack now would be to fully derail this video, so I'll highlight the first piece that truly connected with me, simply titled Midnight. PLA is generally content to let you search for resources, skirt around alphas, venture into uncharted territory, and make memories in the silent serenity of nighttime. And when midnight starts playing, those memories sink in. It gets you out of your head, shuts you up, and shows you the world around you with fresh eyes. Here you are, a pioneer explorer for what will one day be a vibrant utopia, so hopelessly absorbed that the clock has flown over, and yet at peace. Its sparse and alien instrumentation encapsulates the poignance of silence with the unmatched emotional weight of music. It feels just like midnight, quiet but meaningful, heavy but freeing. Does that make sense?
It was wet,
Probably
but
not,
it was
right?
soaking.
It's all high concept bullshit. Music is perhaps the most important thing in the world to me, and PLA makes thorough and masterful use of it. The music doesn't accompany the world, the music enhances the world. And that's beautiful to me. Side note, it's midnight while I'm recording this, and yeah, heavy but freeing. Checks out. You know what else enhances the world? Doing stuff in it. A game as tactile as PLA needs a control scheme to match, so let's boot it up with a single Joy-Con and see how it fares. Listen, I get why this game is incompatible with single Joy-Con, but nothing? No pop-up menu? No controller support disclaimer? This is so sloppy. Let's connect a Pro-Con and get on with it. The left stick controls player movement, and pressing it initiates a quick sprint. It's fairly responsive, but the leisurely walk speed and annoyingly pervasive sprint cooldown were clearly fine-tuned for overworld battling over traversability or realism. In contrast, Weirdeer's lumbering gallop is brazenly unresponsive, but its power to plow through landscapes rarefies PLA's game flow and counterbalances on-foot traversal beautifully. Except in Jubilife Village, where Weirdeer is inaccessible and we're resigned to the world's worst game of red light, yellow light. At least we can walk faster than Laventon, jeez. Weirdeer's lurching walk animation is a minor nuisance, but the logic follows that Weirdeer would struggle with precision. The only real sticking point is dashing by holding B. Having to mentally remap sprint from a tap left stick toggle to a held button input when you mount Weirdeer never becomes natural, and held inputs shouldn't be required anyway. Still, it's hard to argue with Weirdeer's sprint in general. Oh, and Ursaluna controls basically the same, only much slower. The right stick controls camera movement, and pressing the right stick deactivates the HUD for cleaner screenshots, or a pseudo hard mode if you're weird. PLA's camera is so close to perfect. It's surprisingly accessible, with sliders for stick and motion sensitivity and inverted x-axis control. You get a reasonable field of view from any vantage point, despite it pulling decently close to your character. It even pulls back on ride Pokemon to exaggerate their speed. It would be perfect if only it didn't frequently smash cut to your face at high speeds. Pressing ZL to snap the camera behind you should fix this, but that also breaks at high speed for some reason. Holding ZL triggers a staggeringly clunky and inflexible first-person view whose only worth is as a makeshift zoom-in at a complete standstill. Both of these usually manifest as misinputs for ZL's real use, targeting a nearby Pokemon. Together with the intuitive ZR for readying and throwing Pokeballs, PLA's controls skew surprisingly close to those of shooters, to surprisingly great effect. Its core loop boils down to holding ZL to target, holding ZR to aim, releasing ZR to throw, then releasing ZL to detarget, and besides the accessibility concerns, it's exactly as satisfying as it sounds. Pressing L or R cycles through your hotbar, furthering the shoulder button's omnipresence. Between berries, stealth items, stun items, and good old Pokeballs, L and R quietly carry the entirety of PLA's gameplay loop. Garnishing the shoulder button's omnipresence, pressing A in laboratory conditions does nothing. It advances and initiates dialogue, obviously. It cycles through targets if multiple are available, which never feels particularly natural but is a valid use case. Most prudently, it instantly activates the relevant ride Pokemon when a pop-up appears. This is never necessary, plus serves almost its exact purpose, but mapping a panic input to the de facto panic button is pretty heads up. Pressing B toggles, thankfully, the crouching state, meaning B is bound to both stop moving and start moving on a horse. Crouch walking feels extremely polished and comfortable, being appropriately slow to balance its stealth properties and transitioning naturally into dodges done with the Y button. Pressing Y also makes Weirdeer jump, which maps onto dodging close enough, and makes Ursaluna dig up treasure, I guess. It's clearly shown on screen when necessary. And we all know what X does, courtesy of Silene. The face buttons largely fit their assigned mapping, but not inextricably so. The controls are different in battle, although their visual indicators and lack of time pressure prevent them from warranting individual discussion. Props for the option to throw Pokeballs directly from the bag. Pressing minus opens the map, from which R opens a current quest summary, Y opens a page detailing every quest, and X opens a dialog box with all accessible warp points. ZL and ZR control the limited but somewhat helpful zoom function and the occasionally useful option to view other subregions. Thankfully, menu controls barely matter, cause I never got the hang of these. The map itself is aesthetically pleasing and matches PLA's humble mysticism, and its broad strokes art style smooths over the divergent geography of Sinnoh and Hisui. Unfortunately, PLA is forced to use the Switch's notoriously flaky D-pad. Left and right cycle through ride Pokemon, while both up and down open menus, resulting in several unwanted interruptions or impromptu disembarkments on Pro Controller. The down menu is your Pokédex, and the up menu has 4 tabs: Inventory, Save, Online, and Settings. 3 of those are competently made. Saving is done in-universe by recording progress on your trainer card, which displays your star rank, your appearance, and the time since that photo was up to date. Seriously, this permanently default photo eviscerates all charm from this menu. Why wasn't this patched? Finally, while not a button input per se, PLA makes fervent use of HD rumble, so much so that your controller buzzing is practically ingrained into the soundtrack. With the odd exception of turn-based attacks, everything from Weirdeer's dash to choosing a move style is synaptically stimulated with a firm handshake. I don't own a Switch 2, but I bet late-game item farming would trigger that rumble limit pretty often. While sensitivity options would be commended, the system-wide vibration toggle is sufficient here, and I say the more rumble the better. PLA doesn't support touchscreen control, but by 2022, neither did anyone else. Despite a few mapping or presentation hiccups, PLA's controls are mostly digestible with time, and it's hard to find fault in the underlying design. Eventually, I'm snapped back to reality with the announcement of its imminent destruction. I vividly remember my first space-time distortion, sharing experiences with a friend, comparing encounters, and both being earnestly terrified. Distortions are pop-up semicircles of death where everything can and will go wrong, made especially tense knowing how much time you wasted to get there. They spawn after 5, 15, 25, or at most 40 minutes in an area, which seems fine at a glance. PLA is smart to encourage long exploration sessions, right? So let's assume that you seize the opportunity and explore. If you enter a battle, the timer pauses. If you initiate a cutscene, the timer pauses. If you open the map, menu, or Pokédex, the timer pauses. Want to collect wisps? Too bad. If you advance the day-night cycle, the timer resets. If you enter a cave, the timer resets. If you exit a Jubilife, the timer resets. Put this together and you get a game that fundamentally punishes you for playing it. At least it caps at 40 minutes, right? Nope. Fuck you. If it happens to be snowing, thundering, or too sunny, seriously, you get nothing and the timer resets. It's literally thundering inside the distortion. Even once a distortion spawns, it takes frustratingly long to activate using a formula that disproportionately weighs your distance from the distortion and fails to consider warp points. Distortions are magical when they spawn naturally and a major nuisance otherwise. This distortion was insane and I need to show you it in full. The moment it formed, the distortion exclusive Porygon ran right up to me and I managed to panic catch it. Look at this, it literally saw me, you can see the exclamation mark. Porygon is by far the luckiest encounter I could get here for both catching odds and Pokédex completion. After that, the distortion became a free-for-all for rare items while avoiding swaths of powerhouse Pokémon at every turn. No, not the Game Freak definition, we'll get into it. Distortions spawn Pokémon in groups of threes everywhere you turn, not unlike ambushes in a horror film. I would complain about the lack of spawn variety, but they're still plenty intimidating for my power level. Props for including Eevee and its evolutions in it though, that's clever. The outside world is silhouetted to reinforce that claustrous, boxed-in vibe, and while PLA was never going to perfectly evoke a space-time distortion with lighting and particle effects alone, it's still weird that those effects follow the camera. You can freely leave distortions, which admittedly heightens their artificiality, but the boatload of valuable items and the 4-minute time limit entice you to stay. I got some shards, which can be crafted into star pieces and sold for a fortune, an upgrade to evolve my new Porygon, and just before running out the timer encountered and initiated a battle with a prospective team member, Heracross. It can't despawn during a battle, but unfortunately neither can its ally Lopunny, as most of my team gets ripped through by Heracross's splinters-inducing pin missile. Enragement carried out its role flawlessly here, compounding the adrenaline, raising the stakes, and letting me weaken it just enough to complete the capture in the nick of time. After leaving Lopunny to evaporate, the most thrilling distortion of my life was over. I was truly outclassed here, making every small win amazing and the eventual capture an eternal triumph. You might notice something missing here. I sure didn't. Only in my next play session did I realize that my Heracross had inexplicably vanished. It seems like PLA fails to register captures if the player flees before the turn ends. Let's talk about glitches. PLA's code is rife with glitches as has been handily demonstrated. The minor ones, textures glitching in and out, Pokemon spawning in walls, animations not playing, kicking you out of battles for straying too far when you haven't moved, etc., are honorary icons of PLA, only frustrating in their excess. The major ones, crashes, soft locks, unfairly losing would-be team members, can literally tank the game. PLA had numerous patches which addressed some glaring malfunctions and sequence breaks, but it still has an unrecoverable soft lock. I wouldn't call PLA unfinished. One look at pre-release footage makes its final state seem miraculous, but it straddles that line sometimes. The Diamond Settlement, while understated, greatly enriches the world simply by depicting regular people living in it. Just like the wilderness they call home, the Diamond Clan doesn't care about you, they just want to exist. They know of the Galaxy team, so they might ask you to help them, but they're ultimately quaint and peaceful people. They also pointedly dismiss the game's central story, with musings from, our whole thing is time, but time is constant so we don't do anything, to, if there are gods for both time and space, then this entire story is a waste of time. Almost too accurate there. There's a warm glow to this area that generously counterbalances the surrounding barren wasteland. I wish I could check out their houses without resetting that stupid distortion timer. Its placement en route to the noble Lilligant feels completely natural. The Diamond Clan relies on her for protection after all, but also creates a brilliant breadcrumb trail for the player. That is, if guiding wasn't mandatory. Whenever a main quest is active, PLA blazons a bright, intangible emblem over your next destination. If you're in another subregion, the emblem hangs above the exit. If it's just off your screen, a guiding arrow guides you to the guiding emblem. If you turn on guiding for a side quest, which you're allowed to turn off by the way, the main quest emblem automatically returns upon completion or deselection. If you finish a quest, the game immediately funnels you into the next. If you finish the game, you're funneled into a post-game quest to catch every Pokemon. If you finish that, congratulations, the game's over. It never lets up. Sometimes it tells you guiding is off, but it isn't. It would be a considerate option, but it severely undermines PLA as an explorative game to require a guiding marker at all times. In fact, it single-handedly fractures the story and exploration, two elements that should be interwoven, by guaranteeing you will never find a plot beat on accident. Your only motivation to explore, at least initially, is how boring the story is. Imagine a world where Hisui's design mingled with its story, where you could follow the lovingly placed breadcrumbs to progress and take pride in your intuition, or abandon them entirely and forge your own path. And you could still follow the emblem if you want. It's hard not to see its mandate as a sabotage and an insult to both the players and the creators, maybe the most efficiently awful mechanic in PLA. The Diamond Heath introduces fog, a weather condition that actually has gameplay ramifications beyond decreasing overworld visibility. It decreases every move's accuracy. Look, I can respect tying the natural world into Pokemon battles, but this sucks. Its effect is explained in the battle status menu, accessed with the plus button, but your moves' displayed accuracies are weirdly unchanged. Side note, I know this is weird to complain about, but I wish moves still played their animations on this. Here I Aqua Jet this Burmy and it just hops around like nothing happened. If the animation played a little to the left, you could at least get a kick out of seeing your Buizel careening into the distance. Rain, another Mirelands staple, decreases the damage from fire-type attacks, an attribute also shared by thunderstorms. The effect is modest and rarely noticeable, particularly since it's never acknowledged, but it's suitable enough. Likewise, strong sunlight increases the speed of grass types, which I didn't know until the 4th revision of this script. Clearly it's not too important. I tripped on a rock trying to catch this Rhyhorn, my crouch got cancelled, and it noticed me. This feels dumb to say, but that's pretty good, right? It's pretty believable and player-driven, right? I love that PLA features an intuitive tripping system through sheer happenstance. Oh, and another distortion formed, I guess, but its placement over shallow water at Gapejaw Bog made it close to empty. Distortions gravely require a worthwhile return on investment, which is difficult when any non-standard level design effectively sterilizes them. I snagged a few evolution stones at least, but I decided the Heracross wasn't worth another 40-minute wait. I'm already so far above the level curve that I'm inexplicably using Great Balls in this footage, the reward for reaching star rank 3. They're just Pokeballs with a better success rate, by the way. Can't complain about having Great Balls. I spend my newfound freedom marveling at the inexplicably intricate design and texturing of the Diamond Camp's interior decor. Seriously, this pan looks better than my player character. Just before the Diamond Camp, the path diverges to provide access to the optional segment beyond the river. This path is genius, treating curious players to a thrilling exploration session and real challenge. If I'm repeatedly hurtling myself off a cliff like a doomed Bagon in the footage you're viewing, yeah, I missed this. I'm nothing if not persistent, though. This area manages to evoke the buzzing excitement of the first exploration session thanks to a wealth of new Pokemon and items in a fenced-in zone. It even manages to evoke the same shivering fear with a level 58 Alpha Yanmega's crescendoing cries as you snake through the labyrinthine droning meadow. The tension missed an exit when the bombastic Crimson Mirelands 1-2 barged in, realized that it's meant to trigger after defeating the noble, then barged in again anyway. If anyone knows why this happened, let me know. It was honestly very disorienting. The Cotton's Edge Prairie is also excellent for its visual distinctness and for housing Petilil, rewarding devout players with the first look at Hisui and Lilligant. Furthermore, beyond Yanmega lies a beautiful, secluded pond, and on its furthest shore, Turtwig. Pokemon shows great restraint with its starters, often refusing to spawn them naturally at all. This is frequently met with frustration, but it all culminates in this one truly perfect moment, proving beyond all doubts how magical Pokemon can truly be. Imagine being a lifelong fan, and being rewarded for your thorough exploration with a Pokemon that had eluded you for 16 years. Despite capitalizing on decades of restraint, PLA doesn't squander it. This is Turtwig's only habitat, protecting its elusiveness, and proving that PLA cares about the world it's creating and the greater world it inhabits. All that from one turtle. Maybe it's a good thing Pokemon games are so rushed, or else their inexorable whimsy could be weaponized to recreate Huxley's Brave New World. An Alpha Roserade, or Alpha Haunchcrow at night, adorns the path to Lilligant's arena. They fight alongside any nearby pre-evolutions, much like Ursaring, and both Roselia and Murkrow are insufferable health spawns, so I take a cautious approach. Smoke bombs are the best stealth items in the game. Creating a temporary smoke cloud that cloaks you like tall grass is ludicrously powerful, yet consistently enthralling. They're perfect for bridging grass paths in uncomfortably close quarters, or as a security blanket for tense captures, while their strict despawn timer ratchets the tension. In contrast, the sister item's Stealth Spray muffles your footsteps slightly for about a minute. Basically, smoke bombs single-handedly validate and enhance stealth gameplay. Lilligant is a bold introduction to Hisuian forms, transforming a traditionally feminine Pokemon into a bright, athletic, grass-fighting type dancer. Qwilfish and Sliggoo are also technically accessible, but even I wasn't that thorough. This surface-level gender subversion is nothing new, but its tasteful implementation saves it from coming off as a counter-stereotype. Hisuian Lilligant bears striking resemblance to its warden Arizu, which is nice passive storytelling, but it also has Hisuian Lilligant skewed dangerously humanoid. PLA leans so hard into the animalistic side of Pokemon that its overtly anthropomorphized designs feel genuinely uncomfortable to interact with. Machoke is more humanoid than I am. Lilligant is a fantastic combat opponent, but a disturbing team member. This shouldn't share an index with a baby beaver, not to mention a battlefield. Lilligant's introductory CGI cutscene is certainly high-quality flashy, but it's so focused on making Lilligant look fluid and athletic that it forgets to make her threatening. The load times for noble fights are distractingly long, and the fights don't fare much better. The flurry of concurrent effects tear at the game's seams, causing blatant resolution shifts, frame drops, and lag spikes. That survey tip is probably buying PLA precious rendering time. Lilligant's area of effect attacks in a small arena encourage a dodge-heavy playstyle, distinguished from Cleaver's ring-shaped arena, but noticeably easier in every way. I enjoy this fight, but only incidentally. If you want to be highfalutin about it, it could be a potent reflection on the Mirelands. Jagged, confused, unwelcoming, but with enough magic to pull you through. It doesn't have to be, though. That doesn't make a lot of sense. PLA feebly wraps up everyone's disposable arcs in the fight's aftermath to little fanfare. The Crimson Mirelands story is one of uncharacteristic characters, unseemly cutscenes, wasted potential, and cut corners. The area comes alive when you ditch it and fuck off to a weird hill somewhere. Those weird hills, those death-defying alpha encounters, the thrilling victories that follow them, and every individually uneventful facet of day-to-day life in the Pokemon world are the lifeblood of PLA. Even between the seams of the pixelated, poorly performing world, it's not hard to find a genuinely lived-in one, and despite the hostility and the brutality, you might want to live in it too. It's all down to the little footsteps. Descending the hill back to Laventon, I finally collect that Sky's Tumblestone from earlier, and touching the adjacent wisp notifies me that I've found the majority of the wisps in the Mirelands. I don't even like this place. It's muddy, both literally and graphically. I don't love the Pokemon on offer, and it's a largely inessential chapter of the adventure. It's a filler arc if there ever was one, but I somehow tracked down the majority of its wisps. There's something to be said for that. The air changes after exiting the Mirelands. PLA starts taking itself more seriously, digging deeper into its themes. The Coastland story is one of tragedy, of the death of a noble Pokemon and the toll it takes on its warden. Akari broaches her fear that she's wasting her time, which is fair. Arizu takes Edith's place as the town hairdresser. Komodo commands you back to Prelude Beach to welcome some new arrivals, and looking back upon Jubilife, it sets in. In the span of 2 chapters, Hisui has transformed from a hostile battleground to the home of a prosperous urban city, thanks to your work researching and protecting people from Pokemon. We're not being assigned quests out of desperation anymore, but out of trust. It's a wonderful and rejuvenating feeling. Once the tourists are gone, Komodo asks if I truly love Pokemon. I mean, yeah, I think so. The games are pretty flawed, and the characters don't even play their flutes correctly, but I keep coming back, right? I'm always excited to discuss it when the opportunity arises. When the Pokemon IP expands out into new territory, I'm taking the plunge with it. I want Pokemon to be better, and isn't that the kind of sentiment you feel towards something you love? Eventually, I realized Kamado meant the species, and we still have 6 chapters to go, so let's save the waterworks for Polina. I take on a few newcomers' requests en route to Kamado's office. Surely none of these will cause significant distress later. PLA is savvy to enrich Jubilife Village rather than developing more cities. Aside from protecting Hisui's natural habitat, it fosters a tight-knit, ever-expanding community, exactly what Pokemon does best. With the wind in our sails, we wave goodbye to the bustling streets of Jubilife. And out into the vast expanse of nothing. Hello! This was chapter 2 of the 8-chapter Pokémon Legends Arceus video essay that I'm working on. I wish I could have gotten the whole thing out for this summer. I know that was the original plan. That was what I said in chapter 1. At some point, it became obvious that wasn't going to happen, so I wanted to get at least something out for now, and the rest of the video will be coming out probably also in chapters over the course of the year. It will be done by the end of the year. I would love to be able to get it done before ZA, but that doesn't really seem feasible timeline-wise. We'll see what happens. If there are any updates, I'll be letting you know on my community tab, and I'll be letting you know on my Ko-fi, where you can also support me for just $1 a month and get these videos a week early. Other than that, everything from the last time still applies. If you want to be a proofreader, there will be a link. If you want to join my Discord, there will be a link. And yeah, look out for Chapter 3. What is it called? The Cobalt Coastlands and Isolation. Should be a fun one. See you then.